Do you feel stuck playing the same level of tennis no matter how much you train? Well, the good news is it's probably not down to the amount of effort you're putting into your tennis, but more to do with what you're spending most time focusing on. And so in this video, I'm going to give you 7 key areas that you should prioritize with your tennis that are going to make the biggest difference to your game, along with a few tips to help you to train them more effectively. Let's go. Now, it's worth getting a notepad out as I go through these 7 key areas, you'll probably realize that you're doing around 4 or 5 of them, but it's the 2 or 3 that you're missing that will make the biggest difference to your progress. The first thing to consider adding to your normal training regime is to plan your sessions, whether that's planning what type of sessions you're doing on any given week or month, or even planning each individual session itself, as adding structure into your training is only going to help you to get more out of it. Now, it's completely up to you how in-depth your planning goes, but what I suggest is having a rough idea of what balance you want to get between drills and match practice. As if you're a player that does mainly drills and not much match play, you're really going to struggle when it comes to your match play, as you don't have that match tightness and tactical awareness. Whereas if you're a player that only plays matches and doesn't do any kind of training, you might be picking up some bad habits. Now, on a micro level, you can really get a lot out of planning your individual sessions. Because for me, working at a tennis club, I see tons of players on court going through practice sessions. And quite often it would consist of no warm-up, maybe 5 minutes of hitting, maybe 1 or 2 serves, and then they'll play practice matches. Which is fine if that is your match play session, but if that's your training session, you could be missing out on some really good drills that can help you to develop consistency, accuracy, patterns of play, and more. And so my tip for you is to add a little bit more structure to what you're already doing, even if that's planning 1 extra drill in your next training session. And if you're somebody that doesn't really know where to start when it comes to planning your sessions, I've been working on a really exciting product, which is actually launching next week. And so depending on when you're actually watching this video, I'll put a link in the description below for you to find out more information about it. The second element is the most important shot in your game, and it's your serve. I'm not going to go through the importance of your serve, as there are so many videos out there that do that, but I'm going to give you a few suggestions that might help you to improve your serve practices. The first is that you should really dedicate time to your serve specifically. As I mentioned before, most players that I see will only hit a few serves before playing a practice match. Even if you can dedicate just 10 minutes extra per week on your serve, you will reap the rewards. When it actually comes to your serve practice, there are a few things that you can add or tweak to it that will really move the needle in your favor. The first is to make sure that you practice both your first serve and your second serve. Most players only practice their first serve, but in fact, it's the second serve that really makes or breaks your service games. And so if you only have a 10-minute practice, do 5 minutes of first serves and 5 minutes of second serves. The second thing that you should really try to add to your serve practices, if you can, is to have somebody return the ball for you. As lots of players get into the habit of hitting their serve and landing and standing still, when in fact, when you're playing matches, you need to be ready to pounce on that next ball. And so just by having somebody down the other end returning to you can make things much more realistic and allow you to practice your serve +1. If you don't have a hitting partner, we've got these really cool rebound targets that we use here, which are a fantastic way to practice your serve +1. But if you don't have anything that can rebound the serve for you, just make sure that you practice your movement and a shadow swing after you've hit the serve. That way, at least you're not getting into the bad habit of standing still once you've landed. The final thing that you can add to your serve practice to make it even more effective is some form of pressure. By setting yourself a target of first serve percentage or second serve percentage, or even setting up zones on the court for you to try to aim towards. Put something on the line for when you pass or fail your own little test. It can really help to increase the pressure. And if you've got a partner down at the other end, you can compete against each other to see who can get the highest score. This also goes for all of the next tips that I'm about to show you. Anytime you can add pressure to your training, it's going to help you to translate that training onto the match court. Number 3 is your return. And this is definitely something that is really undertrained. It's the second most important shot in tennis after the serve, as 50% of all points start with it. Now, yes, you're hitting a forehand or a backhand, but it's very different to a rally ball forehand or backhand. The ball's coming to you at a different speed and trajectory, and the movement pattern's different. And things to prioritize when working on your return. Number 1 is your split step timing. Make sure that you're stepping forwards as your opponent tosses the ball up, and you're making your split step as they strike the ball. Once you're timing your split step well and you've got momentum going forwards, the next thing to prioritize is keeping your backswing short and compact. This can really help you to be accurate redirecting the pace of the serve that's come towards you. And finally, think about where your returns are landing. When you're returning a first serve, if your opponent's got a big and effective serve, you want to be aiming through the middle of the court and aiming for good depth. However, if you're returning a slower second serve, you want to be really stepping in on that ball and being more aggressive, aiming to pull your opponent into one of the corners of the court. But it all comes down to dedicating some time to work on your return of serve. Now, number 4 really resonates with me as it's an area that I'm increasingly struggling with, and it's fitness. Now, clearly by spending more time working on your serve and return will help you to win the short points, as you're going to be starting off each point in a much better way. However, when you're playing against stronger players that are making lots of balls, your fitness plays a huge part. And if you struggle with your fitness, then the next elements that I'm going to go through will also be tough. Now, I appreciate that not everybody has time to dedicate specifically for their fitness. In fact, it might even be that tennis is your form of fitness, and that's great. But there are a few things that you can introduce to your time on court that can help you to get more out of it from a physical perspective. First, it's important to understand what your weaknesses are from a physical perspective. Examples are if you struggle when it comes to playing long matches and you feel like your game starts to deteriorate in the second and third set, then a simple suggestion would be to extend the length of time that you spend on the practice court. Because if you're only practicing for an hour and then you have an hour and a half match, you're bound to struggle as your body's just not used to that period of time. It could be that you feel super out of breath after long rallies, in which case in your training sessions, try to spend less time in between each rally. As I know from experience, when I'm training, I'm a lot more laid back and I'll spend more time in between each point, more time at the change of ends as I'm chatting to my friends. But the reality is, if we're practicing in this way and then we play in a really intense match, it's going to be very, very different. And so if fitness is something that you really want to work on, try to shorten your breaks in your training sessions. But if you don't struggle with endurance or stamina, but maybe strength is an issue, there are some ways that you can add some strength training into your practice. This is where I really resonate, as I've been suffering from knee pain recently, and I know that it's come from weakness in my legs. This is my own fault, as when I'm in the gym training, I'm often training upper body. I avoid training my legs. I think that's because in the back of my mind, I don't want to be tired when I'm coaching on court for 8 to 10 hours a day. However, in the last couple of months, I've had to introduce leg workouts into my weekly routine, and it's made a massive difference. You could start the session with a 10-minute circuit, doing bodyweight moves such as lunges, squats, plyo lunges. I'm not going to go into detail on this, but let me know if you'd like a video on that. But the key is to know what your weaknesses are from a physical perspective and to try to train that within your training sessions. Number 5 is spending time working on your consistency and your rally quality, which is why tip number 4 was working on your fitness, as if you struggle with endurance, then your consistency is going to suffer. Now, although most rallies that you play when you're playing in matches are going to be less than 6 shots long, having the ability to rally to 100 shots is only going to give you confidence to go for your shots more. And when it comes to your training sessions, I've got 3 drills that can really help you to start your session in the right way. The first drill is simple. It's called the 100 shot rally, and you've simply got to try to rally to 100 shots with your partner. And your aim is to see how many balls it takes you to get there. Obviously, the perfect round would be doing a 100 shot rally with 1 ball. But if it takes you 3 balls to get there, then that's your benchmark to beat next time. The second drill is simply hitting half court on the cross court. Try and do 20 shots cross court on the forehand, followed by 20 shots cross court on the backhand. This hones in your accuracy as well as having a consistent base. And finally, the bow tie drill. This is where you play on a full singles court. One player hits cross court and the other player hits down the line. This is a great one as it incorporates not only consistency and accuracy, but also movement. And so when it goes back to the first element of planning your sessions, it could be that you simply add one of those drills to your practice session. Even if you don't have time for a drills-based session, you could just add that drill to the start of your practice match. But as you can see from these tips so far, you're starting to build a really solid foundation to your game. You're spending time on the first shot in the rally, the serve, and the return. You're getting fitter and stronger, which in turn is going to help you to build your consistency, which leads us on to number 5, which is now taking care of your tactical intentions. This is where your match practice comes in. 3 simple tactics that you really need to train into your game. 1 is serve +1 patterns. Can you place your serve into a certain part of the court and hit your next ball into a different part of the court. Practice serving out wide and hitting into the open court. Practice serving out wide and hitting back behind your opponent. Practice serving down the tee and then hitting the next ball to the backhand, and come up with your own patterns. But by sharpening this part of your game, again, really helps you to start each point well and to dominate more often when it's your serve. On the flip side of this, you also need to work on your return +1 patterns. A return +1 pattern will be different depending on whether you're receiving a first or a second serve. If you're receiving a big first serve, like I mentioned before, your priority should be to hit that shot deep through the center of the court and looking to attack on the next ball. Whereas if you're returning second serves, you could be more aggressive on that return, trying to pull your opponent into the corners before coming in and finishing with a volley, if that's your game style, or you might prefer to stay back and look for a forehand to attack. But when it comes to playing match play, try to work on your serve and return +1 patterns. The final pattern that's going to help you in those longer rallies is trying to play cross court as much as you possibly can and saving the down the line shots for when you've got a much easier ball to attack. This way you're going to play with much bigger margin for error. It's going to reduce the decisions that you have to make in your points and in turn give you more clarity and make you feel more controlled during your points. But just like I mentioned earlier on the serve, try to add some form of pressure to your match practice. It could be something as simple as the loser has to buy the coffees next time, or that you publish your results in a WhatsApp group. Either way, by adding some meaning or pressure to your match, it can help it to feel more like a real match. And in turn, everything that you do in this match will translate onto the match court. So if you've got your notebook out, we've now gone through 6 of the 7 key areas that you should prioritize within your tennis. And I want you to think about if you can make any changes to your training, whether that's adding one of those elements into it or just adjusting the way that you train that element. Because the final element number 7, is to reflect on your training and your matches. As honestly, this is probably the biggest one that most people forget, and is so powerful for your development. Even if you forget all 6 of the other key areas, just by reflecting on your practices and your matches will plant a seed in your head for your next training or your next match. And so I really advise that you get a notebook or a journal to jot down notes on your performance and the way that you felt on the court, or even just using the Notes app on your phone. What I'd recommend writing down is firstly, what went well in your training or your match, what didn't go so well in your training or match, and what you're going to change next time. The power of physically writing something down is massive. Just the act of doing it will really help those things to sink in more and to help you to be more productive in your next session or match. Now, hopefully you can see that you don't need to change a hell of a lot in your sessions, but just by making a little tweak here or there to certain parts of your sessions can really help you to get to that next level in your tennis. I'd love to know what you're going to change within your tennis training sessions, so let me know in the comments below. And if you're intrigued by the product that I'm launching next week, head to the link in the description so you can be one of the first to hear about it. Thanks as always for watching all the way through to the end. I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Take care.